Hey there and welcome back to another Marvel video. And recently we saw the release of the first trailer for the upcoming MCU Disney Plus series, She-Hulk Attorney at Law. And I'll be honest, this one actually did take me by surprise. Yeah, I realised that the show was coming at some point, but it was more at some random point in the future, always on the horizon. And because of that, I have never really got all that hyped for it. And then the trailer dropped, and I'll be honest, I'm still not that hyped for it. I don't know if I'm in the minority here, but I've never really been that interested in Hulk in general. Ever since I was a kid, I've just found him a bit boring and two-dimensional. And I mean, for the most part, this version of Bruce Banner's good, but Hulk was always a bit boring. But he got way better in Ragnarok, and then he disappeared into Professor Hulk. And you know, he's still pretty good, but he's not a character I'd want to base a whole story around. And for the most part, I'm also not really feeling She-Hulk. But at the same time, the show does look pretty unique, and Marvel rarely fails completely, so I'm going to give it a chance. But I'm just struggling to get past the design of the character herself. Seriously, her face, it's not the greatest CGI or motion capture or whatever we're calling it. Her face just doesn't look right. It veers into uncanny valley at times. And I really hope this is just an unfinished version of her design. Otherwise it's going to be very hard to sit through. And it's not like it's a minor character you can just brush over it, ignore it. She's the main attraction here. Her design needs to improve, specifically that face. But at least the plot looks pretty interesting, if a little bit generic. But I can overlook that as well, as we're in a new era with a lot more origin stories to deal with as the next generation of heroes gradually replaces the old guard. I can understand the genericness of that. It's gonna get better as we go along. But yeah, just gotta up those visuals. But anyway, with all that being said, let's take a look at the trailer. So we start off the trailer with some pretty generic shots of a city, a SWAT team pulling their guns out, what looks to be a fancy dinner function going into lockdown, a bunch of henchmen standing around with guns and crowbars and stuff, and then finally, a car rolling off a road and smashing into a forest. Pretty classic setting the scene type of deal. And meanwhile, we have Bruce Banner narrating over the top, talking about how being a superhero is a trial by fire, and that people like, I guess She-Hulk, because it's clear that he's talking to her in this scene, are needed to protect the world. But let's just take a look at those scenes to piece together what's happening a little bit. Okay, so the SWAT team, I guess this is from a scene where she first transforms, or at least her first public transformation. Maybe she's at the function we see in lockdown, she gets mad, she turns green, people freak out. And then when she walks outside, she's confronted by the authorities, and a standoff ensues. Hell, maybe she has to become her own legal counsel, considering later scenes suggest that She-Hulk's identity isn't public knowledge the entire series. Anyway, yeah, so that would place the fancy dinner at a similar point in time for me. The Goon Squad is also clearly just that. It's a goon squad of criminals that She-Hulk is going to eat for breakfast. And then the car accident? And I'm gonna guess that this is going to be Jennifer crashing the car. Pretty sure in the original lore of the story she needs a blood transfusion or she'll die and Bruce is the only match, and that's how she gets her powers. So I'm gonna guess this is why she gets the transfusion in the first place. And it must happen pretty early on as well. Kinda like Doctor Strange. And then we get our first look at She-Hulk, or at least our first look at She-Hulk's ass in Lycra. I mean, we haven't even seen her face yet. Jesus. The editors know what the people want, I guess. And then from here, after some pretty cool theme music, we move into learning a little bit about the character of Jennifer. So we see later in the trailer that she does some speed dating or something as She-Hulk, so I guess her awkward speech about being a lawyer and having awesome friends and a frustrating family is her talking to a clearly disinterested man who ends up leaving, making her feel self-conscious. Now, she mentions having friends. And the only one we really get to see in much detail here is the walking stereotype. You know, the crazy party friend who's always loud and excitable and loudly demands alcohol at every chance. Every franchise seems to see one of these characters turn up at some point. And so here we are. We have that character. And honestly, I think of all the potential shows and films in the MCU, this one's probably the best place to get away with having one of those. It feels like they're going to lean into a lot of the tropes that you'd see in those mid-2000s rom-coms that have a main character who's like an attorney or a paralegal or whatever. They're socially awkward, and they're quirky. No luck with dating. They have attractive and successful friends, and then chaos ensues as their life goes down the toilet, etc, etc. And then mix that together with the action and craziness that is inherent with the MCU, and honestly, it's bound to be a good time with a lot of humor and silliness. And it's at this point that we learn that, I don't know, some random US department has started a superhuman law division, and they want to add Jennifer to it to head it up. So obviously she isn't just some random schmuck. She's smart and successful. But I can't help but think that it's a little late for them only to be creating a superhuman legal division in the 2020s, when at this point in the story, superhumans have been openly existing for over a decade. I know lawmakers can often be slow to react to certain things, but the existence of people who can level cities and bring forth the apocalypse in an instant probably should have led to a faster response by the authorities. I mean, surely, especially after things like Civil War and stuff. God. Hell, I mean, just even after Avengers 1. Why wouldn't these laws be rushed through? I can't imagine any major political party disagreeing on this issue after New York City got leveled. Hell, even after half the planet got snapped away, maybe this would have been a good time, but no. Only now, years after Thanos was finally defeated for good? Bit inefficient. But anyway, we'll move on. And then I love that we saw the return of Abomination, who is back in prison. So does Wong bust him out to have their little Fight Club stuff, or has he been recently chucked back into the clink? I wonder if they're actually going to explain any of that, or if it's just going to be a fun little reference. I'm hoping that since Wong actually is in this show, they just don't acknowledge it at all, and they act as if them being friends is just normal. Just ignore the fact that this guy was a supervillain, that he killed people. And is she going to end up being his legal counsel and get him acquitted? Or is he going to be a villain here? Or a reformed character? But anyway, moving on from that, we then got to look at her frustrating family in the form of Bruce Banner. So does he ever transform back? I feel like actually being that size for most of your life would just be so inconvenient. So anyway, he's going to take on the mentor role in this show, and is probably going to help Jen get her transformations under control pretty fast, starting off with the meditation as we see in the trailer, before moving on to the more science-based stuff where he locks her in a room with buzzsaws approaching her to try and force her to transform to protect herself. And I say science in the loosest of terms. But I guess it would help her be a proper hero to be able to switch at will. So anyway, it works. And then she rips off the door and chases Bruce around. And yeah, fair enough. I would also be pretty mad about that. But why does her hairstyle change so dramatically? I mean, 1 minute it looks normal, then she transforms and suddenly it's fabulous. What's going on here? We then have a couple of scenes where Jen has to balance the lifestyle of being a lawyer and being She-Hulk. And judging by these scenes, I'm thinking I was right in people not knowing who She-Hulk actually is. I'm thinking that she's going to be pretending that she was her legal counsel, and that's why she gets so famous at first. But then obviously, it's all sort of going to crumble away and she's going to get exposed to She-Hulk herself. And then, I guess she'll embrace the lifestyle of being She-Hulk, judging by the shots of her dressing up for a red carpet event, and then hanging out at what, a country club? Posing for photos? Okay. Also, I did enjoy Marvel poking fun at the majority of their heroes being billionaires or narcissists or having troubled lives that involves the death of parents or friends or loved ones. And then we finish off the trailer with a few cobbled together shots of She-Hulk fighting Titania after she busts into the courtroom. Some random green costume guy, I don't know who that is. Hulk air horning Jennifer while she's sleeping, maybe to try and trigger a transformation. The two Hulks drinking together, and my god, that is a mighty big bottle of booze in the background there. Abomination transforming and bumping his head, and so yeah, I hope he isn't the villain and he just turns into a funny side character. Before we finish the trailer with more Tinder dates that culminate with her bringing a dude back to her apartment and carrying him off to the bedroom in her Hulk form. Eek, death by snoo indeed. So yeah, it is a little janky and it doesn't really explain all that much. And then on top of that, her character model does need a lot of work, but I'm cautiously optimistic. I like the vibe of the whole thing.
It's just the vibe of the thing.
And the sitcom/rom-com feel it has going for it works really well. Marvel seems to be experimenting a lot with their shows, which in my view are starting to outshine the films for this phase, so hopefully this one keeps that trend going. But anyway, that's all I really have to say, and I would like to remind you that these are just my opinions, and now I'd like to hear yours. What did you think of the trailer? Good? Bad? Think the show's going to succeed? I'm curious for your thoughts, so make sure to like, comment and subscribe and let me know.